The presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Peter Obi, has asked President Bola Tinubu to address the allegations of certificate forgery and unveil the secrecy behind his true identity leveled against him. Obi made the call at a press conference in Abuja. Arise correspondent Chinaza Samuel reports.
Days after the Chicago University released President Bola Tinubu's academic records on request by PDP's presidential candidate Atiku Abubakar, reactions have continued to trail the document. The release did not only unveil aspects of Tinubu's academic history, but also ignited questions about the credibility of the document submitted to the Electoral Commission, including his true identity. The spotlight is yet again on Tinubu's academic credentials, this time by the Labour Party's presidential candidate, Peter Obi. Addressing the media in Abuja, Obi says the controversy surrounding President Tinubu's academic records is further damaging the image of the country globally, as Nigerians are, among other things, now perceived as certificate forgers. He wants President Bola Tinubu to come clean and personally address Nigerians to lay the matter to rest.
Uninformed outsiders now see every Nigerian as a fraudster, certificate forger, or identity thief. Chief Bola Ahmed Tinubu should have saved the nation and himself this protracted embarrassment and undue anxiety. He should reintroduce himself to the nation he governs and to the world for avoidance of further doubt. He should let the world know his name, his nationality, his place of birth, his parentage, the primary and secondary school he attended with dates, as well as the actual universities he attended and certificates obtained. The people deserve to know with certainty the true identity of their leader, and this overrides whatever rights he may have to personal privacy.
According to Obi, his appeal to President Bola Tinubu is not politically motivated, but born out of a true desire to preserve Nigeria's credibility, one which he says has been tainted. Obi says the tax on clarifying allegations of academic credentials forgery and identity theft must be undertaken by the president and not outsourced to spokesperson or media aides.
This is not a political matter. I want people to understand. It is no longer politics. I've said it over and over again. It is about integrity, morality, values, and the rule of law that defines the character of a nation and its people. A leader cannot outsource a clear, unambiguous personal statement about his identity to political surrogates, official spokespeople, lawyers, or any other person, no matter how highly placed.
As the political implications of the controversy continues to unravel in the coming days, all eyes are on President Bola Tinubu to formally speak on the matter as demanded by the opposition. Chinaza Samuel, Arise News.
The All Progressives has described as joining the bandwagon the decision by the Labour Party's presidential candidate Peter Obi to join the PDP's Atiku Abubakar in his call for President Bola Tinubu to address the issue of his certificate and identity. The APC National Publicity Secretary, Felix Morka, in a statement says Obi jumped on the tailboard of Atiku's bandwagon to satisfy his alleged insatiable thirst for cheap media attention long after his Labour Party had dissociated itself from the call to action by the former vice president. The APC urged both opposition presidential candidates to know that President Tinubu does not need a reintroduction as he has no identity problem, except the one allegedly contrived by the two opposition leaders. He condemned the attempt by Obi and Atiku to use the mainstream and social media to intimidate the judiciary, incite the public to violence, and disparage justices of the Appeal and Supreme Court. Meanwhile, a report by BBC says there is no evidence that the diploma President Bola Tinubu submitted to the Nigeria's Electoral Commission was forged. The report says the conclusion was reached after a team from the broadcaster looked at some of the most widely circulated claims. All right, Rufai, I'm sure you've read the BBC report. It was certainly trending yesterday, and the press conference by Mr. Peter Obi, the response by the PDP camp, a lot going on yesterday.
So I read the BBC report, not an in-depth job done. It was a cherry-picking report that just talked about some areas and a couple of things. Number one, the part in the BBC report that the report did not talk about, it didn't talk about in the deposition where the school confirmed that what was submitted to INEC was not from them. Didn't also talk about the fact that there was a certain Michael Enahoro Eba, which was also in the deposition, that it was what they had about President Tinubu that they gave to Michael Enahoro Eba, which was at variance with what he submitted to INEC. And it was there in the report. Also, the report talked about the deposition talked clearly about the step-by-step procedure of how you could get a replacement certificate. And that speaks to the talk about third-party vendor, which the report talked about the fact that you go, you make your request to the website, and from there, they process it, you pay for it. And you can even get them to mail it to you. So that was also talked about in the report. So it was just some of the parts of the report. And I think for the sake of, our job, we need to be more rounded and we need to be more circumspect across board. And also, even the heading was sort of like clickbait. Because it was at the tail end, then the report now confirmed and said, okay, yes. Oh, they talked about clerical errors. That was why the reason for the discrepancy on the dates. But the report did not even also talk about, part of the deposition, about the document that said there were still some courses that needed to be done prior to graduation. Didn't talk about that. It was just at the tail end. They said, okay, the government college, Lagos was not set up as at 1970 when, the president claimed he left us at 1974. But you see, all of these things are already in the court. They put them out in the court. So this was just in response to the BBC reports. The APC, yes, has reacted to Peter Obi's statement by saying that the president does not need to reintroduce himself and that he's got nothing to say to the people since the matter is in court, and also the fact that about close to 9 million people did vote for him and all of that. I would also say, let us leave the matter in court because it's the court that will be able to prove what happened. All right, so they have made a deposition in court. Peter Obi saying here for the sake of public morality and integrity. Yes, there's that that talk about public morality and integrity. But like I will also say, him coming out to give that press statement after the matter has gone to court, the matter is already in court. Let the court rule. After the court rule, the conversation of public morality can continue. But in all of this, let the court rule, let the court come out of this, and then the conversations definitely will continue to reverberate.
All right.
When I saw the press conference by Mr. Peter Obi yesterday, I thought it was needless. If Mr. Peter Obi is considering a career in evangelism, there are many people who have gone from other careers into evangelism, but within the framework of the electoral process, what he did yesterday was just, in my view, just seeking media attention, looking for publicity. Why do I say so? The electoral process is effectively a process. If you, as a principal member of the process, if you have any grievances, the best place to go to is the court of law, and which is what Atiku Abubakar has done, the presidential candidate of the PDP, pursuing his matter in the court of law. The last time Waziri Atiku Abubakar had a press conference, he came out and said he wanted the candidate of the NMPP, Rabiu Kwankwanso, to join him, and also Peter Obi of the Labour Party to join him. The Labour Party released a statement and said they were not part of it. Okay, is it that now the Labour Party has changed its mind? The only appropriate forum that Mr. Peter Obi can adopt is to go to court, to say he has issues to raise. But to come forward and then be giving a press conference and moralizing, it doesn't quite fall within the framework of the matter before us. But of course, for publicity purposes, for attention-seeking purposes, what he has said has generated attention. And I think that the response that he has received from Felix Moka of the APC is in place. What Felix Moka has said is that the 8.9 million people who voted for Bola Ahmed Tinubu in the election, in the presidential election, they were not groggy when they did. So there's clearly a division on the matter in Nigeria. And the only place you can resolve it is not through propaganda, it's not media attention, it's in the court of law. So Mr. Peter Obi must be very clear about the fact that the matter is now before the Supreme Court, and it's only the Supreme Court that can decide on that particular matter. What are the questions he has raised about identity, about qualifications, about... This is like campaign after the election, as far as I'm concerned. It's campaign after the election. We have moved beyond the campaign. So he should stop campaigning after the election. If he has any issues, let him approach the courts. That's my honest opinion on that particular matter. As for BBC, again, I've made a point repeatedly on this program, quoting Nikki Toby, JSC, as he then was, in Atiku Abubakar versus Musa Yaradua, where he said that, look, public opinion, no matter how weighty it is of no consequence in the court of law. That what the law is interested in is the provisions of the law, not what you think. Either you are sitting on television and you are enjoying the privilege of having a microphone in your mouth, or you are in the public square where you can say whatever you like, or you are in a beer parlor where you think you have opinions. Most recently, the CJN of Nigeria, Justice Aruwola, more or less echoed the same thing that Nikki Toby JSC had said when he was, swearing in judges of the Federal High Court. And he said, look, the court of law does not go by public opinion. So how do we situate this? Whatever the BBC has said with their investigation and all of that will fall within the province of public opinion. Okay, whether their investigation is correct or not, okay, they say they have done their own oversight. We call it in journalism, investigative journalism, because we too hide under the rule of law and say we have a job to do. Anything that goes out there in the public domain, as investigative journalists, we have a duty. So that's the protection for BBC. But their opinion is of no consequence in the real sense when it comes to the court of law. It is for the Supreme Court to look at the facts of the matter, the issues at stake, and to determine accordingly. And whether or not we agree with it, well, we'll come back here and do judicial review. But people should move away from evangelism on this matter. Finally, what do I want to say? I mean, in the same vein, SAN Olisa Agbakoba had advised, I guess appropriately in this instance, that there are too many bathroom lawyers. There are bathroom lawyers, there are officers in the Temple of Justice, and there are ambulance chasers. Too many ambulance chasers in this case. Olisa Agbakoba used the phrase armchair lawyers. People who just sit down and they talk about what they know nothing about. Okay? Haven't even not read any material, relevant material in the subject. So that's why I keep saying, look, let us leave the matter to the courts to decide. When we come back, we can now begin to talk about how we feel and all of that. But the court, the last bastion of the common man, will have taken his decision. Although in Agbakoba SAN's matter, where some people have accused him in some fora that he himself is part of the problem. After all, he was the one that brought up the issue about Section 137. But that is neither here nor there, in my view. The section that he brought up is on the table now before the courts. But please, let us be properly guided. If Peter Obi has any issues, the courts are still available for him to seek redress.
Well, the BBC, as a media outfit, has done what would be described as has been mentioned as an investigative piece and presented their own side of facts with regards to what they've considered looking at the case and the matter before them, or examining the position of Kawersberg of CSU, and they presented it for the Nigerian or perhaps international audience based on what they believe is their findings. They're not the first to have done this. A number of media outfits, a number of media organizations, personalities, analysts, politicians have also waded in or perhaps looked at this issue that is almost overshadowing the actual issue and actual work of governance, whereby we need to look at policies. There are more important issues to focus on, especially at this time. But this is what happens when we have a case like an identity that's not very clear, whereby the main issue of governance is a huge distraction from that. I believe it's one of the responses that had talked about the fact that let's not forget that it's only one NEC meeting that's happened, since at least with the new ministers, since the president came into power. Let's not forget that palliatives have not been distributed in terms of in commensurate measure to the increase in fuel prices. Let's not forget that food inflation is at its highest. We are debating about certificates. It's a huge distraction whilst people are suffering. Go and ask the woman or the man who is unable to send their children to school because of the cost of living, and ask her if she cares or he cares about certificate debacle. People want to survive. People want to eat. It is important because and even though it's argued that yes, it's before the Supreme Court and they will rule on this, but as Mr. Peter had said during his press conference, which I believe he did in his capacity as a Nigerian, because he said this wasn't politics, it was about morality, it was about the rule of law and so on and so forth. It is important to establish that. So the simple thing is, yes, the court processes are ongoing. Let the president have a simple fireside chat with a group of journalists or people that he himself nominates, and let him put paid to a number of things. Give us a life history, a life story of yourself, where you're coming from, how you've achieved or emerged as president, and put paid to all these arguments. And more importantly, let us focus on what should be focused on. Nigerians are suffering. People cannot afford to eat in a day. People cannot afford to live as they ought to live. These are the crucial issues in the matter of governance. Yes, the court will rule, but we must not forget the ordinary Nigerians who are still suffering, who are not able to eat, who have not received, the promised palliatives. The cost of living is going high. Salaries have not been reviewed. These are the things. There's oil set to talk about 2.3 trillion naira being lost. Important issues, but also very important, like Mr. Peter Obi, are going to attract foreign direct investment, that we must be a credible nation. We must have credible leaders. It is very important for governance. Move on to our next story this morning. Chief Executive of the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission, Gbenga Komolafe, has expressed optimism that parties to the share sale of the local unit of ExxonMobil will engage themselves within Nigerian law and follow due process if they are to conclude the effective transfer of JV assets from ExxonMobil to Seplat. Komolafe, who spoke to reporters on the sidelines of the Africa Oil Week in Cape Town, South Africa, emphasized that the stalemate on the transaction is purely a commercial and not a regulatory issue. He urged co-venturers NNPC and ExxonMobil to play by the law. The regulator had last year refused to approve the $1.28 billion sale, a deal some in the industry say is key to getting much-needed investment into Nigeria's oil and gas sector. All right, Rufai.
Right, so real quickly, we remember when this story came about, we thought it was a big deal in the oil and gas sector that if the deal had gone through, but the regulator said no. So apparently what happened was that NNPC had a couple of stakes in the JV, and they had to clear out all the encumbrances because there's a need for understanding the fact that they've got a right of first refusal before you sell. So, but if he's saying that since the Tinubu administration had come, that there's been a lot of green light as regards this deal, let's say it pans out because we need the much needed capital injection into our market, petroleum, our crude market, because, so we talk about crude oil theft a lot, but the problem why we're having low productivity is not about crude oil theft alone. It's also about lack of investment. When you look at FDIs, they've dropped tremendously. Most people are not doing new oil deals in the Nigerian belt any longer, apart from people buying facilities inwards, if my memory serves me right, I think since the time of the Engina deal by Total and a couple of other consortia, there's not been really any major project in the system. So that also affects FDI. That's also the problem as regards Forex and the likes, and also what we are facing currently, that you have a slump because most of the oil wells are old and moribund. So when we have new deals like this, yes, it could be a sale. So we are also expecting a lot of more money coming into our oil and gas sector to be able to revitalize. But on other parts, we're also looking at probably is the prospect as regards gas. But this is good if NURPC says that there's a green light, things might, if they can just tie up the commercial loose ends and things might accelerate quickly, then it's a good one for Nigeria. I mean, that's some good money.
Brilliant.
Okay, this story is about Gbenga Komolafe, the man in charge of the upstream regulatory Petroleum Commission, NUPRC, saying that going back to the issue about transfer of assets from NNPC to SEPLAT. Now, that was controversial in the past. About a year ago, I think we took on this subject here. And the regulator was saying, specifically at a conference in South Africa, that the issue is not regulation. The issue is commercial. And that what NNPCL and SEPLAT should follow is the rule of law. Now you go back to the PIA. Under the PIA, there are specific provisions there that have brought us to this stage. The PIA, changed the framework, okay? And it talked about commercialization, it talked about transfer of existing assets into PPL, petroleum prospecting licenses and petroleum mining licenses, old OPL and OML. So that is what has brought us here. And then the commercialization of NNPC, NNPC becoming NNPCL. So the rule of law that Gbenga Komolafe is talking about is governed by the regulations that came out of the PIA. The NUPRC came up with certain regulations under the framework of the Petroleum Act 2004 and under the framework of the Petroleum Drilling Act, I think also of 2004, Section 17, Sub 2 of that. So those regulations are there. Guidelines and regulations with regard to how you can obtain the minister's consent. So that's what, Komolafe is talking about. However, NNPC opposed the sale of the existing OPL, OML to SEPLAT. And the regulator is now saying that, look, the regulator has no issues with this, except you just follow the laws that I have quoted. The Petroleum Act, laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004, Section 17, I think it's Sub 5, not Sub 2. And also the petroleum drilling and petroleum production, whatever. It's also an act of 2004. So that's what he's doing. Okay, we cannot argue that the rule of law should not be followed. But what is instructive is that petroleum PIA, that Petroleum Industry Act, there are issues with it. And many of those issues have not been resolved, including issues about hosting communities' rights, about this transfer of leases and assets. It's also controversial. So that's originally what we are dealing with. And I hope that this National Assembly that is now there will pay attention to some of these unresolved issues. After all, the PIA was a major issue during the general elections in 2023. And there were presidential candidates who said if they won the election, they will take a second look at it. So Gbenga Komolafe is absolutely right to talk about rule of law. We cannot argue with that. But what are those details that we still need to be worked out? That is a major issue in this subject.
All right, yes, as has been mentioned, what the focus would be would be to focus on the benefits. In terms of from Seplat's position, they'd say that it would has the potential to increase production by 186%. Of course, some of the reasons why NNPC is speculated for why NNPC had opposed the deal was beyond that the control of Seplat, if they do acquire the shares by ExxonMobil. However, it's great to announce or to see that the deal isn't off the table. Conversation started in 2021. Of course, as Mr. Gbenga Komolafe had mentioned, they are hopeful that once all parties abide by the rule of law, regulatory authority is present to ensure that the deal goes smoothly. And I believe that it's important to focus more on the benefits to Nigeria and Nigerians in terms of this bill, and for the eventual agreement to favor all parties, parties involved. It is important at this point to mention that we will continue to bring updates. We hope that it would not be prolonged in terms of coming to an agreement, especially from Seplat's point of view, which is largely a larger Nigerian company, and NNPCL in terms of the position it takes on this particular deal, the joint venture between ExxonMobil and NNPCL, and see how that would affect in terms of production and output for oil. It's an important conversation, especially in light of all that's happening in the oil sector. We've looked at oil prices going up, looking at the impact on wars. We've looked at the removal of fuel subsidy. We've looked at making the upstream sector, the oil sector, more efficient. We looked at the role of regulatory bodies and to ensure that the rule of law is obeyed. So critical points and important things to definitely consider. But we'll keep our eye on this story.